These are the 10 biggest bombs in Edge of Eternities. If you see one of these cards in draft or sealed, you should really try to fit it into your deck because these all-stars will help you win more games. First is Possibility Technician. For 2 and a red, you get a 3/3 that says, whenever this creature or another Kavu you control enters, exile the top card of your library. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may play it if you control a Kavu. And it also has 1 and a red for its warp cost. It is also conveniently a Kavu itself, and there are plenty of other Kavu in red in this set. So Possibility Technician is just a bunch of card advantage attached to a relatively good body already. A 3-mana 3/3 is something you're already going to be happy playing a lot of the time, and you get an extra card out of it when it comes into play, as long as it sticks around for long enough for you to play that card out of exile. And you can even warp it in the early turns to get an extra card into exile. Maybe you can play it that turn, or maybe you just have to wait until you have this card back into play to play that first card you got into exile from the warp cost. The fact that it also works with your other Kavu means that even if they kill the Possibility Technician, as long as you have a couple other Kavus in your deck, you're still going to have access to those cards, which means they can't really deny you the card advantage in an extended game. This card is absolutely fantastic, really hard to interact with profitably from your opponent's perspective, and is going to take over the game with its card advantage while also just affecting the board state in a meaningful way. Next is Lumen Class Frigate. This is a spacecraft. For 1 and a white, you get a card that comes into play with no real abilities, but the station lets you tap another creature you control to put charge counters equal to that creature's power onto the spacecraft, and then as you station it up, it gets extra abilities. The first one is the most relevant. For 2+, other creatures you control get +1/+1, which means that this is going to be a really hard to interact with anthem for your entire team, buffing all of your other creatures. And it also conveniently makes those other creatures bigger so that when they station, they more quickly get to the 12+ mode where you all of a sudden have a 3/5 flyer with lifelink, which for 2 mana is a great deal, even though it did require an investment of a lot of your creatures. So basically, it makes all of your creatures huge for just 2 mana. It's really easy to get that 2+ going. And then while your creatures are huge, if they aren't able to attack for some reason, they can slowly work towards making this into a big 3/5 flyer with lifelink. Though keep in mind that that will make it a little bit easier to interact with because your opponent's kill spells might then be able to kill it when otherwise they wouldn't be able to. So keep that in mind. But for 2 mana, this card is an absolute bargain. You're going to love playing this card in your white decks, and definitely a card that you should prioritize. Next is Ouroboros. For 2 green, you get a 1/3 plant worm that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is this creature's power. Notably, that does include itself. So you play this on turn 4, it comes into play as a 1/3, or you could even play it later in the game. But at the beginning of your combat, you're going to put a counter onto each creature you control and your Ouroboros. So all of a sudden, it's going to be a 2/4, and then the next turn, you're going to put 2 counters onto it. And then the next turn, if you even get to that next turn, you're going to put 4 counters on your creatures. So basically, your opponent is going to have to kill this card immediately, and as long as you play it when they're tapped out, you're going to at least have netted a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures, which is a really good deal for a card that only costs 4 mana. This one is absolutely fantastic and worth prioritizing. Next is Elegy Acolyte, another 4 mana card. For 2 black, you get a 4/4 lifelinker, already a solid body. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So a lot of the time, if you maybe have a creature with evasion or your opponent has all their creatures tapped, you can chip in for a little bit of damage and immediately get some card advantage out of this card, which is fantastic. It also has Void at the beginning of your end step. If a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So not only is it a 4 mana 4/4 lifelinker, which is already pretty solid, it also gets you card advantage when creatures hit them, and it can make an army of 2/2s if you're able to trigger Void consistently. So if you kill your opponent's blocker, hit them for damage, draw a card, then the Void will trigger at the end step because you killed your opponent's blocker. You get an army of 2/2s, you get a 2/2 robot. You can see how this card can quickly snowball out of control, and it's even pretty good when you're behind because the lifelinking body really does help you stabilize if your opponent doesn't immediately kill it. So Elegy Acolyte, absolutely fantastic. Next is Quantum Riddler. So for 3 blue, you get a 4/6 flyer, which is a Sphinx. When it enters, you draw a card. So immediately you're going to get your card back, even if your opponent does kill it. It also says as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, if you would draw 1 or more cards, you draw that many cards +1 instead. So if you play this at the top end of your curve, maybe you have nothing left in your hand, you play this, you draw a card, And if you have one or fewer cards in your hand, if you would draw the card, you draw 2 cards instead. So that's even better. And it has warp. So if you top deck this in the late game when you have nothing in hand, then it's great. You just play it as a 5-mana 4/6. But in the early turns, if you just want to hit your land drops and stuff, you can still warp it, get it into play, draw that extra card, and it'll go away. But you can then replay it for the full cost later. So you can get some extra card advantage out of it then as well. Just a fantastic card. It's pretty much impossible for your opponent to kill this thing without you ending up ahead because you draw the card, and sometimes you'll even draw multiple cards out of it. So just a really, really solid card. Next is Nova Hellkite, another giant warp creature. So for 5 mana, 3 red, you get a 4/5 flyer with haste. When it enters, it deals 1 damage to target creature an opponent controls, and it has warp for 2 into red. And notably, because this card has haste, when you do warp it in, you're going to be able to hit your opponent with it. So you're going to be able to deal 4 damage to your opponent for just 3 mana. Oftentimes, you'll be able to ping down one of their creatures in that scenario as well by dealing 1 damage to it. And then you get to play it again on turn 5, hit your opponent for 4 again immediately, ping another creature. It's just a really, really strong card and does so much damage. It's fantastic in your aggressive decks, and it's just good in any red deck. Next is 0-Point Ballad. For X and black, you get a sorcery that says destroy all creatures with toughness X or less. You lose X life. If X is 6 or more, return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. Now, this card does require a little bit of work to be good because you want to make sure that you have kept your life total high in the games where you're playing this card. You want to maybe have some lifelink creatures in your deck. You maybe want to have the ability to chump block with some like small token bodies or things like that. But if you can get to a point in the game where you're casting this for X equals 6, you know it's coming and your opponent doesn't. So you're going to be able to set that up, kill all the creatures in play, and then get back the best one, even your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard, into play under your control, which is really, really strong. You can also set this up in other ways where if you have like one big creature in play and your opponent has a bunch of small creatures, like say you have a 4/4 and they have a bunch of 3/3s or smaller, you can kill all of your opponent's creatures with it while keeping yours alive, or make trades so that you'll be able to use your 0-Point Ballad to maximum effect. And so because of that, 0-Point Ballad is a really, really flexible tool. And even though it is a little bit hard to deploy sometimes when you're low on life, it really makes up for that by being so good in the games where you're able to have a reasonable life total and just absolutely annihilate your opponent with it. Next is Cosmogrand Zenith. So for 3 mana, you get a 2/4 that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, choose 1. Create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So as you might imagine, the first time you trigger this, you might want to get those extra 1/1s, and then the second time, because you have a wider board state, you have those extra 1/1s, you might want to put the counter on your creature. But a lot of the time, the first mode is going to be to get those extra 1/1s. One of the powerful things you would often do with this sort of spell is save it until something like turn 5. So you can go play Cosmogrand Zenith and then immediately play another spell for 2 mana so that you can trigger it immediately, and you're always going to be able to end up ahead in that exchange. Even if they kill the Cosmogrand, you're still left with a couple 2/2s, and then maybe on the following turn, it'll be turn 6. You might have 6 lands into play. You can play a couple of 3-drops, trigger it again. You really want to make sure you plan ahead when you have this card in your hand, but it really does reward you for doing so. It's only 3 mana, and it can absolutely take over the game on its own, which is just what you're looking for in your bomb rares. Definitely a card to prioritize. Next is Mightform Harmonizer. For 2 green, you get a 4/4 that says whenever a land you control enters, double the power of target creature you control until end of turn, and then it has warp for 2 into green. So the really strong part about this card is that you can do it multiple times in a turn, targeting the same creature. So which is especially easily to trigger in this set because of the lander tokens, which let you sacrifice them to get extra land drops into play. So if you have Mightform Harmonizer in play, you just play it on turn 4. On turn 5, a lot of the time you'll be able to go play a land, make Mightform Harmonizer into an 8/8, and then you'll have a lander token in play. So when you attack your opponent, they have to expect that you're going to be able to turn your Mightform Harmonizer into a 16/16 by just cracking your lander token, getting another land into play, and turning this doubled again into a 16/16. One of the other things is if you have multiple landers in play, you can threaten doing this with any of your creatures. So if you have a 3/3 in play or something like that, you attack your opponent with a 3/3 and a 4/4 and another 2/2 or something like that, your opponent has to be worried about you like doubling and then doubling again potentially any of your creatures if you have some of those lander tokens in play. So Mightform Harmonizer plays super well with lander tokens, and also just making your creatures giant when you play lands is also just generally quite good, all attached to a 4 mana 4/4, which is just a solid body on its own. So this card is really, really strong. And the warp mode means that sometimes if you're a little bit short on mana, or you just want to play this so that you can then play a land and buff a creature temporarily, that can also be a really nice thing to have access to, though I think the default mode is going to generally be to play this as a 4 mana 4/4, because that is a pretty good way to affect the board state. Next is Mutinous Massacre. This is the final card on the list, but it is 7 mana. It is the first multicolored card we're looking at. It's a sorcery, 3 black, black, red, red. Choose odd or even. Destroy each creature with mana value of the chosen quality. Then gain control of all creatures until end of turn. Untap them. They gain haste until end of turn. 0 is even. So the way this card works is you're going to be able to kill a couple creatures, usually killing more of your opponent's creatures than your creatures because you've been planning on this card for quite some time at that point. And then you gain control of everything and you just get to hit your opponent for like a bajillion damage. So oftentimes you wouldn't even want to kill the creatures because you would just rather have everything in place so you can steal them all and hit them all. This card really rewards you for letting a prolonged board state build up where both players just have a bunch of creatures in play, because then you can oftentimes like target your removal so that you kill the key threats, make sure you make trades favorably for this to work out, but it really just does end the game in situations where no other card would end the game. It can hit them for so much damage at once, and just being able to gain control of all those extra creatures for one massive swing can really just end the game in a hurry. So this card is really, really strong, really hard to play around if you don't know your opponent has it, and the sort of card that can absolutely win games that no other card would, which is just what you're looking for in your bombs. That's going to do it for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, leave #TheBest in the comment section down below, because these are the best of the best cards in the set and will help you win more games. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.